Hey guys, my name is Gloria and welcome back to my channel where I review all kinds of books but mainly lean towards darker fiction and also document my quest to become a published writer myself. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for 100 subscribers. That is bizarre to me. I know I had goals to reach this year of how many subscribers, but to actually think that 100 people have subscribed to my channel is mental. So that is a lot of people. So a lot of motivation to keep going with this. So thank you so much for anyone who's subscribed so far, and you can like and subscribe down below if you like what I'm doing here. But today, for today's review, I'm at the very far end of the Horror in 24 readathon. I am a week late to the end of it, but better late than never is a motto that I say because I'm late for everything. But today I'm going to combine the second last two prompts. Tomorrow I will be reviewing the Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay, which was the group read for the readathon. But today I'm going to be reviewing the books that I read for the psychological horror book and any book that's been on your TBR for ages. I thought I'd just put them together because I have a few things to say about the psychological horror, but not so much to say about the one on my TBR. But the books that I am reviewing today are the psychological horror of Gerald's Game by Stephen King, and the book that has been on my TBR forever. I think this was the first book I picked up off the free book table at work. Because of the cover, is Irish Ghost Stories, selected by Rosemary Gray, collection of 1700s, 1800s writing from many different writers. So these are the two I'm going to be doing today. So I'm just going to get this one out of the way first. So this is a collection of Irish ghost stories. It has a lot of writers that I've never heard of before, but a lot of writers that I have. So we have Douglas Hyde, we have Sheridan Le Fanu, which is a new favourite of mine. There's like 10 stories of his in this. There's also Bram Stoker and Oscar Wilde, and there's also a Dorothy McArdle. And if you've been watching any of my other books, I recently reviewed a Dorothy McArdle book for the gothic prompt in this readathon as well, so I'll link that up above. But yeah, I really like Dorothy McArdle's stuff. This is a collection of a lot of different stories. I was a little bit disappointed in the beginning because it's supposed to be Irish ghost stories. The majority of the first quarter at least is just about leprechauns and little folk, and you know, those are interesting folkloric stories to read, but they're not very scary for me, and they're not very creepy or gothic in any way, and they're certainly not ghosts, so I'm not entirely sure why they were included in here. However, I did learn that there's all kinds of leprechauns, which as an Irish person you'd think I'd know. I did study some folklore in college as well, but there's also cluricauns, and there's all types of leprechauns and fairy folk. I also was reminded of how little Irish I know, but there was a story in this where they got the days of the week wrong, and I was like, if there's one thing I know from 14 years of studying Irish in school, it's the days of the week. Thank you very much. It was good. It was really interesting to read a lot in Hiberno English, which is basically an amalgamation of the way that Irish people talk, especially in everyday talk and stuff. We don't really go with very strict English grammar rules and whatnot. We carried a lot over from the syntax of the Irish language, and you know, for example, in Irish you wouldn't say that you are sad, you would say that sadness is upon you, and so in a lot of Irish people sort of talk with that same syntax, even if they don't speak Irish anymore. It's just the way that we talk. But it felt again quite like reading Dorothy McArdle. It felt quite cozy and homely for me. There were a few bizarre ones. A couple of them weren't ghost stories. A couple of them were stories about widows, and there's a lot. There's the Henpecked Giant is a story by D.R. McAnally Jr. and it's basically just, if you ever wondered why people used to hate their wives, it's probably because they were reading stuff like this. Just a choice line, but this went on for quite a few pages in this. That's like a woman, for she's not to be trusted. She's not to be trusted even when she's dead. A lot of women hating in a couple of these stories, especially from D.R. McAnally here. Very bizarre. Not ghost stories, just kind of sort of folklore based, or just kind of traditional marriage kind of things. It was a bit strange though. I was a little bit disappointed that they weren't all ghost stories, but there were some great classic gothic kind of stories in this. The Bram Stoker one was really creepy. What was that called? Bram Stoker, The Judge's House. That was a classic kind of ghost story. The Oscar Wilde, The Canterville Ghost. That was actually really funny. If you get a chance to read The Canterville Ghost, it's basically a story of an American family who move into a haunted house in England, and they don't believe in ghosts originally, but then when the ghost appears and does strange things, they immediately believe. But in a very commercial and materialistic American way, the ghost appears with creaking chains, and the man of the house immediately comes out with a special oil to take the creak out of his chains, and none of them are afraid of him in any way. They're not scared, and they sort of depress the ghost by annoying him and not letting him do his job. So that one was really funny. I really like that Oscar Wilde one. I found a new love in Sheridan Le Fanu. I've had this for ages. I bought this a while ago. Tales of Mystery and the Supernatural by Sheridan Le Fanu. It's called In a Glass Darkly. Partly bought it because it's got an owl on the front, because I love owls. But yeah, Sheridan Le Fanu is a new love of mine. There's loads of stories of his in this that I really liked. Really good gothic writer. I really liked his stuff. But yeah, it was very interesting. I'll read anything about Irish writers to find out more about them. And that is finally off my TBR. And on to the psychological horror. So I wasn't even sure if this was strictly considered a psychological horror, or is it a thriller, or I don't know. Genre lines get blurred a lot for me, and it was a psychological horror in my opinion. So Gerald's Game, if you have not heard of it, it's a very simple premise. Man and wife go to a cabin to have some kinky times. Man handcuffs wife to bed, man has heart attack, dies on the floor. Woman has to figure out how to get out of the handcuffs before she dies. That's the very basic premise, and as with any basic premise or simple story, it's all in the execution of it and making it interesting for the reader. So the only thing I will say about this is I think it could have been a little bit shorter. Just 50 pages maybe. Just there seemed to be a lot of repetition going on in this, that because it's all based over a 2-day period pretty much, and it's all based in one room, I just think he was trying a little bit too hard to stretch it out. But other than that, I really like the story. I would definitely recommend the movie, which is on Netflix right now. There are some great actors and actresses in that, and it really stayed completely true to the book. When I was looking up the story, apparently for a long time since the book came out, people thought it was impossible to make it into a movie because it is so internal, but when you see the movie you're like, of course, that's the plain way to do it. But the movie is basically exactly what the book is. They just changed very small elements so that they could change it to a visual medium. To dive a little bit deeper into this, because I was really interested in the book. So on the surface, this is a simple story of survival. She's trapped, she has to figure a way to get out of it before she dies, or before. There's also an added dangerous element to it, in that in her sort of delirium she sees a strange deformed man come into the house at night, and she's not sure whether he's real or a figment of her imagination. Is she imagining him as death that's stalking her, and he's going to come in the next couple of days when she finally dies of dehydration and claim her, but it's just another added dark element to it and another added push for her to try and get out as soon as possible. So it is a story of survival and a story of a woman trying to hold on to her sanity in the face of death, but there are a lot of layers to it, so not spoiling the book at all, but the accident that happens that leads to her being trapped here is to do with Gerald's game. So Gerald is Jesse's husband, and it was his suggestion to try out handcuffs and to try out tying her to a bed. And originally they started with silk scarves and stuff, but then he went and got military grade police handcuffs, which are completely unnecessary, but it was something he wanted to do. And being the submissive wife that she always kind of has been, Jessie just agreed with it. But on this particular occasion, she changes her mind and she asks to be let go. She doesn't want to do it with the handcuffs. And Gerald sort of starts to argue with her. He sort of starts to become very frustrated and starts to ignore her. And in Jessie's mind, she can see in his eyes that he knows she's serious, but that because he's a lawyer as well, in a court, if she was to challenge him, it would be pretty much impossible for her to prove that it was forced, that it wasn't consensual, because she did consent to being handcuffed, and he could just say it was part of their game, or he thought it was part of their game for her to struggle in some way. And this sets off a bout of fear in her and brings to the surface some unsavory memories that she's been trying to repress since she was a little girl. And in doing this, she ends up kicking him in the chest, which could be argued helped to bring the heart attack underway, but either way, he dies and then she is left there. So her being tied to the bed is a very obvious metaphor, but it is well used for the fact that for most of her life she has been shackled and silenced and held down by some other repressed memories in her mind, by other men in her life, and this is the turning point where she has to get out of the shackles herself, and she also has to face up to the memories in her mind and work her way through them in order to get out of the shackles. So the book is centered around her trying to think her way out of things, but she also has these voices that she listens to in her head. One of them being the goody wife Burlingame, which is basically the very submissive, very self-deprecating good wife that she is, who's always trying to put her down and always trying to make her meek and not argue with Gerald or anything. And then there's also the voice of a friend that she had in college, the friend that was always outspoken and always filled with anger and never let anyone give her any shit, basically. And this voice is constantly telling her that this is a real situation, she is going to die if she doesn't get out. It's the very, it's the voice of reason pretty much, and it's also the voice that makes her look at the memories that she hasn't been wanting to look at since she was a child, and to really work through them and see how they are connected to her entire life and to this leading up to this very moment. So in that way, I don't think any other sort of accident like this that would have happened to her, I don't think it would have led to this kind of psychological impact on her. But with all these elements going on, I think that's the reason that she not only is trapped to this bed, but that she goes so deep into her past and into her psychological state and has to work through so many horrific things just to get out of the handcuffs. So this is a book that does deal with sexual abuse of minors, of the manipulation of minors, and how these things can and do impact people through their entire adult lives as well. How children who are used in this manner by people that they think they love, and that's another aspect of it that was really interesting, is that a lot of children who are used this way still love and respect the people who hurt them, and they're filled with rage and they're filled with anger and hurt and shame because of it, but they still love and respect them and they still want to protect them from the bad thing that they did. But it's how these things can completely change the makeup of their brain and change how they react to everything throughout their entire lives, and can have an impact on very adult people in their adult lives and their adult decisions and their relationships with other people. It's a clear metaphor for her state of mind, for the handcuffs that were forced upon her as a kid, and for the silencing that was forced upon her as a kid. And it's a culmination of the struggle to repress that and to not even think of it herself, and it's just all come to a head, and she can't do it anymore. And the key to her getting out of the handcuffs is in the memory itself. It's in the bad place that she doesn't want to go on that day where there was an eclipse and she was alone with the person who hurt her. But she has to examine that memory, and the voices in her mind have to push her to examine that in order for her to continue living at all. Up until now she's basically been surviving, but I think the point is for her to get out of these, to get out of the fear, and to actually start to live. And then of course there is the Moonlight Man. I have this little guy with me at the minute because I think he looks a little bit like the Moonlight Man in the movie, at least. I think in the movie his eyes are red, but I still like him. He's got cool little eyes. So the Moonlight Man is a figure that appears to her when the sun goes down. So the story begins early in the morning, or early in the day at least, and then as the day progresses and the lights start to change, she falls asleep, and when she wakes up there is a man standing in the corner with a box filled with bones and jewellery and trinkets, and she can't tell whether she has imagined this, whether it is a hallucination, or whether it's an actual person who's snuck into the house while she's been tied there. And just as the little girl Jessie has to find the sun after the eclipse, the adult Jessie has to find the sun again after the Moonlight Man. So I thought that was a really interesting sort of flip side to it, and an interesting callback to her childhood. And either way, if he's real or he's not real, he still represents a danger to her, either physically or psychologically, with losing her sanity. So she has to get away from him and she has to escape before he comes back. I find Gerald's Game to be as always with Stephen King, a raw and unsanitized story of sexual abuse, of the sacrifices that a lot of women in the past and even today have had to make to please their husbands and to be seen as the good wife. And I really did like it, other than the sort of circular conversations she had with some of the voices in her head, which could be argued that would be expected from someone who's sort of delirious in her state. Other than that, I loved the character of Jessie. I was with her the entire way. I was rooting for her the entire way. I wanted every little step that she took to work out for her, and I think she's a great character, and she's completely flawed. She's completely the type of person that I think a lot of people would relate to, being that in this situation you would kind of hope that someone would just come along and save you, but unfortunately that's not always the case, and I don't think that I could do what she does in this story, but at least I have the idea in my head now if I do have it. But also this story is about the importance of a safe word, Philadelphia. I can't remember where that's from. That's from a TV show actually, I can't remember. Oh my god, was it Desperate Housewives or something? Philadelphia. Anyway, and also you don't need military grade handcuffs. Plastic fluffy ones are just fine. You should always have a way to get out of it yourself in case something like this happens. But yeah, I would definitely recommend the book, I would recommend the movie, and I would recommend The Story of Jessie, as it is harrowing, gruesome, but a great story of survival. So I very much enjoyed that. So that is the penultimate prompts for the Reading in 24, the Horror in 24 readathon. I shall be back in the next video with Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. I luckily got that as a physical copy in the Portable Magic Books subscription box. You can see me opening that up here. Thank you so much for 100 subscribers again. Thank you so much for anyone who's watched this video, who's liked any of my stuff. If you do like my stuff, you can like and subscribe down below, and you can tell me what you thought of Gerald's Game, or if you know any good ghost stories that maybe don't involve leprechauns. I would really appreciate those. And I shall see you in the next video.